Barbara Carpenter. I am from Kraft Heinz, invoice to cash. So credit, collections, deductions, and cash application. Our largest piece is the deductions portion. I started 4 years ago, remote. I started with about 350 employees. We outsource everything to a third party. So at about 350 now, I think we're down to about 250 analysts that work the Kraft Heinz account, but it's through automation, transformation, change management. I've done several software implementations, the last 4 companies, same AR software I've used in the last 4 companies. And I just really have a passion for change management and especially transformation or automation. I know it's very fearful to people because you think of, change management or automation, the first thing that comes to mind is I'm going to lose my job. If anything changes, people get fearful, especially I've noticed in the AR, and I think we were talking this morning, even the AP, people are, been in those roles for several years. So to get them to change, it's really hard. But, the very first implementation was not as successful because, people hold back information. So I thought, well, when I do this again, what am I going to change? So I've learned, and every time kind of evolves. And then I think just interactions like this, talking to different people, like even on the AP side, I learned a couple things, from you this morning. And I'm like, oh, you take back to the AR side, even though you think it's very different, but automation journey can be, same for even supply chain and, any other, departments. It's not just AR. So I'm more AR. So a lot of my background is that, but I mean, if we, keep an open mind that it could be, any of your teams, any departments. But so I think just automation, just a quick, definition, the use of technology to perform tasks with minimal human intervention. I think another thing coming up is AI, right? That's a huge buzzword right now. So automation to me, is a little bit different than AI. We've automated manual processes where maybe AI is, the next step. But I think there's a lot of automation, of our manual processes personally, my company and the people that I talk to that we have to get right before we can look at the next step, which would be AI. I did a similar presentation like this 2 weeks ago for Iowa. That was a webinar. Learned a lot there as well from those people. So I've incorporated some of that into this. And I think it's important that it's not just, machines taking over. I think you still need the people, right, to make those processes faster. If the machines, the automation breaks, who's going to take over? If the file comes over with all the data doesn't come and you don't have your cash applied or you don't have your invoice in the system, you still need people. So I think that's what people forget sometimes. It does make things, faster, more accurate, more, less stressful. But I think the key thing here is you still need people and they can stop doing the busy work and move to something that's more value add, like analytics, or maybe being more proactive rather than reactive. So I, try to, share that with people because it's so fearful, like automation, it's just scary to people. I think this is a great thing. I think these are some, misconceptions or understandable concerns that you have. It's going to take my job. It's too complex. What if we, automate and I don't have the skill set for what's coming? It's less personal. I'm not going to be creative, but I think you are going to be more creative because you're going to have time to do more value add things and more analytics. Why would you want to spend your entire day 10K cash being applied when you can maybe go and be proactive and try to change customer behavior or work with sales? So that's one of the areas that we struggle with is sales, like getting them on board to try to help with the customer behavior. So maybe you have time to go and do that. To me, I think that's more interesting work rather than just, manually 10K every day for 8 hours. I think another piece of it is it's expensive, especially for larger companies. So a lot of the softwares out there are, millions of dollars to implement. So trying to put a business case together for that and the ROI can also be a little bit scary. And then, where do you even start? So I think that's some of the fears. And this is kind of where it gets interactive because I don't know where you guys are in your automation journey. So I try to steer it to where you guys are because, smaller companies might have not even started the automation journey. Somewhere like a Kraft Heinz, everything is automated. We still have issues, and I'm saying there's also room for more automation, but we're very far ahead of the game, and some people are like, where do I begin? So I don't know, where you guys are in your automation journey. If you guys can share that. Are you not even automated? I think, we were talking this morning with Joy about AI. He said, hey, where are you in the AI, versus automation? So I think that some people are already thinking about that, so they might be on that side, where some people haven't even started the discussions. So I'm just curious where you guys are with your companies and your backgrounds.
We run the full gamut with us, like
Yeah.
some haven't started for us, but I would say I recognize a lot of that, and I think a lot of it, there's a phase there in between of what we saw a lot of the work changes. Here's the task you're not having to do, but now you spend some time correcting what your automation didn't do correctly, and so then you learn, right? We teed up a bunch of tasks and wrote the code, I guess, to go do that. And now the person's job changes a little bit in the interim there of now I'm fixing the mistakes. And so it continues to evolve. Then it gets to a point where that's even less of that time. And my opinion, I would think organizations need to come with, okay, now what do I do with those resources? Now that I've automated this work, now what do I do? Like you said, if there's creative play or what else can I go automate?
Because I feel like there's always work, right? I mean, you automate one process, but that doesn't mean everything's running smoothly. So if you've automated this, process, maybe there's something that you can share with AP, customer service, marketing, order management, somewhere else. And I think one of my previous managers, which was a great mentor I'm still friends with today, told me, you always want to work yourself out of a job. That is the scariest advice I've ever been given. But if you are that good at, automating, or you're creative thinking about how you can make processes better, someone's going to want that skill set. I guarantee you, they're not going to say, oh, well, if you worked yourself out of a job, you're not valuable. To me, that is so valuable. And that's where I think really the automation, the change management, continuous improvement, that's why I'm so passionate about it, because to me, it doesn't mean you're losing your job.
I think you hit on that, and because we went through, and I know we'll talk about, we've just done some moving off of our old ERP to new ERP. It's a great opportunity to learn something new. The marketability of learning, great, and then we move to Workday or whatever, and seeing that, I'm like, there's lots of people who are going to be doing this or going. So it's not just now, but what do you learn as you go forward that you can apply to other stuff and getting into it? And I think sometimes it's just the thought is about, I'm gonna lose my job, Well, what about the things that you can learn here that will help here? But if something does happen, just you've got another skill now. So trying to balance that part of it to get them excited about it, because for change for a lot of them, it's hard.
And it's interesting because my last 3 roles were not, LinkedIn. I didn't apply to a job with nothing. They were all referrals, and it was all because of my AR background with one particular software, because I've done the implementations multiple times now. But they were going through it and they said, hey, we heard you had this background. We need someone with that background, which is hard. So your Workday, for example, you want someone that does a Workday implementation. I'm sure you have the great skill set. You can lead your team. You're a great manager. But if you had the skill set, they probably go with someone that had the skill set. So they were looking for someone with that skill set. So I think that is something to always think about too. It's a great skill set. And my last 3 roles were all from, people that have reached out to me, not me applying, because they were going through that automation journey.
And to your point too, I think there's a combination and try to teach from a team perspective. It's not just about the system, it's about the business and the system. So it's here's what's being created from a number perspective. Great, here's what it says. How did it get there? And understanding those systematic pieces and flowing gives them just another kind of combination and building of a skill set. Like I said, sometimes they go, numbers wrong. Okay, that's great, but where did it come from? What happened to be able to kind of lead down to know what you're trying to figure out in some of these things? I mean, with taking that, even though it's new, instead of just your, 10 key. That's cringe when I hear that. But now it's a different source of where it is. It's not just that you fat fingered something else potentially has happened that you've got to figure out.
And I use that example with the 10K because at the IOFM conference last spring, there was a woman there and they had a horse, where they sent out people for same day, like an urgent care for horses. And they only take payment by credit card because they run the credit card, before they can do the services. She said she spends 2 days, full days, manually putting in credit cards, 2 days. So for her, she was there trying to find something, is there any way I can automate this so I can maybe do something else that's more value add? But I mean, that was just last year. To me, that was mind boggling that with technology, you mean, like she said, some of the fears, like the cost, like everything I've looked at, I can't find something specific. And the cost versus the return on investment, she said, my boss has said, well, it's better for you to just do this 2 days a month rather than spend $500,000 on software. And then, putting a business case is another, the business case behind it. It's overwhelming if you haven't done that and you're tasked with, you're in a current role and your manager comes and says, hey, we need to automate something. Where do you even begin? I always reach out to my network. Hey, have you done this before? I always ask for, when I'm doing business cases, if I'm looking at 3 different companies, hey, give me your top 3 clients. I want to hear their pros, their cons, to help me put those business cases together, just so I have somewhere to start. But it was interesting to see how many smaller companies, they don't have the money to go and invest. So they don't have that luxury of saying, I have, $1 million IT budget. Where do we want to, get together, AP, AR, marketing, where do we want to split it? Everybody gets in a room, you kind of, fight it out, and you get 500,000. You're like, okay, that's what I have for AR or AP. Some people don't have that luxury. So how can they, start that automation journey? I think one of the things I talk about, automation handles repetitive, right, low value tasks, because you want your team focused on more strategic work. And I think that that's hard, especially in like AP, AR, even order management. You don't think strategic, you're just thinking, get the money in the door for AR or AP. How can I pay, people? I don't want any delays in that. But there is some strategic work in those analyst roles that they can be very valuable. There's a lot of things that teams that I work with, I don't know what they're doing because I did that maybe 20 years ago. I would go in there and clear deductions or make payments. So technology has changed. So to me, I'm always trying to learn from the team because that's where I'm going to benefit, not from, just making strategic, decisions with leadership. To me, I want to know what my team is doing because I want to be in there and help. If the file goes down, I can go in there and help clear deductions. If it's month end, we're not going to make our numbers. So I think that that's what, you can focus on more creative things in your roles rather than just the boring piece of it. But I think it comes with also, I think the other big word is empowering your team. If your management style also comes from your manager, if you're very controlling, they're not going to feel empowered. To me, I'm like, I want to empower you. I'd rather you fail and try than not try at all. So to me, that's a big, just key word that I want to say because it's just so important because the very first implementation I did, my boss said, you're either going to sink or swim. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to sink. I want to fail at this. But if you would have never given me that chance, I wouldn't have been able to do those next 4 implementations with those 4 companies that I did after that.
I think the value that your team brings in automation and as you're designing it becomes extremely important, just as you talked about, just because I've got some analysts who they do certain things, they know how certain things work and the way things go. Taking their feedback and listening to them as you build helps you prevent mistakes. I know, and we'll get into it later, but I have a person who I'm like, you're going to drive this. I'm here to support, but what needs to happen, how some of this should work and what goes on. And it's not just from a leadership position having to make all of the decisions. Again, we make some of the strategic decisions, but the value that you empowered your people to be able to say, hey, here's what goes on. No, this is the way it works. Okay, you know what, here's what we need to make sure happens in that design, those phases becomes really important.
I think, in my experience, automations, obviously it's to enhance jobs and everything. One of just the key watch outs that I've seen is don't eliminate those positions where they have the business knowledge. And we've seen that. And actually some of the members on my team for recovery audits were in a position where they were displaced. So they were in AP, or they were in merchandising, or they were in lease accounting, and they actually came over to the recovery team because they understand the business, but their role was overtaken by automation or third party. So I would just say as a key watch out for anyone that's doing the automation, make sure that you maintain that intellect and that knowledge, because without it, it is just a machine. So you're gonna have that variance, but you're not gonna know what it means. So, that, and then you have, senior managers and management that they don't understand because they weren't in the daily, activity, operations of it. So, that's just like from my experience, what I've seen. So I think it's so beneficial. I think it just has to be executed appropriately and make sure you don't lose that, because you could be saving a lot of money and time through automation, but you could be losing that on the back end too. So that's just one of the key watch outs.
Yeah, I think it's critical. How do you present that to senior leadership? Because they just see the bottom line. How much is it gonna cost me? What am I gonna save? How much is the head count? And it's super frustrating to me because it's not about the bottom line. You're losing the knowledge.
Right.
And that's key. You're not gonna, like someone that's been there 15 years, 10 years, 20 years, you're not gonna have that knowledge. The machine is not gonna do it. And if the system breaks and you're down for a week. Yeah, I mean,
And then you have customers or vendors calling them too, saying like, I need help with this. And it's just like, well, the report says this, so it's that like, connectivity, the business, the partnership, too. So I think maintaining certain key individuals, so it's like almost like a hybrid, like automation plus maintaining some of the key individuals that will help facilitate the process to help, transfer the knowledge.
yeah, especially that background, having that and going into, recovery, they see it from this side, right? And they know what to look for. So they're gonna be more successful than someone that doesn't have that background. They know how the customer works. They know how the system works. They know how the company works. And I think that's critical. I mean, nowadays, everything is about the bottom line, but, I still have a heart for the people too. I mean, I know it does happen, right? Where you have to get rid of people, but, as much as you can keep that knowledge, I think it's really crucial.
And it's never a problem until something happens and you have that problem, right? You're down to, it's like, they knew this, Lisa knew what's going on. Jenny knew what's going on. Why did we get rid of it? Because that's what you told me to do. Because of your bottom line piece, they're like, maybe we need to sometimes they start to rethink about that knowledge base and the people aspect of things. Because unfortunately, sometimes we see that we don't like people. You think about it. I mean, they say it from a board mentality, but it's like when you work with people day in and day out and develop their relationships and understand how important they are, it's being able to sell that to say, this is what they're really bringing and doing to help from a benefit perspective.
And I think something else you said this morning was about consultants, right? So when you have, an implementation, you have consultants that are the knowledge holders, right? They're going to overpromise. I've never seen them like not overpromise, and they always underdeliver.
Yeah.
They're gonna say you can get rid of 50 people, or it's gonna save you $1 million, and then they don't realize, the hypercare is, 2 months, and you can't just flip the switch. It turns on today, and then you get rid of 50 people. There's gonna be a phase where you have to work through the bugs. You need to be, very good with communication, to senior leadership, so they know that's what's gonna take place. And I think that the consultants wanna overpromise, and then, hypercare is done, bye, and still stuff isn't working. So I think that's critical too, is you really need to keep, just short leashes on the consultants and those that are implementing it, and really bring to the table, hey, these are my concerns. And, you need someone with a very strong personality saying, no, we're not shutting off the hypercare. We're gonna go for another month because we still have these 10, issues that we need to work through.
Oh, I agree 100%. That is, you can just do my presentation. Very long at all. Like, it works together.
I think we already kind of touched on this, some of the benefits, increased efficiencies. I think tasks are completed faster, leading to output that is in less time. And they can, again, work on something that's more strategic, more creative, more value add, improved accuracy. I know that there is still human error because there is human involved, but there is a lot less risk of human error. If you're someone's, applying cash every day or, putting in invoices or POs, yes, there's always going to be errors, but I think the risk of human error is much less. And they can maybe analytically, start reviewing the data and be, again, proactive rather than just manually sitting there doing manual processes. And I think it, obviously it reduces workload, the manual workload for people. And to me, whenever I meet with employees, what is it about your job that you don't like? Let's see how we can get rid of it or change it or, do it differently. And then what would you like to do? Oh, you don't really like sitting here applying cash manually? Okay, well, let's find a way to automate that. And then if you had those extra 4 hours in a week, what would you do with it? So don't just say I'm only gonna work, 30 hours now because I got this automated process in place. But no, what would you do with that extra time? Look for opportunities, and that's where continuous improvement comes into play. What can you do that could make a difference? And I think that continuous improvement is a buzzword that, all companies want. They want a lot of money from it, but it could be just something that saves you 30 minutes a week, not something that saves the company millions. There's so many processes through little mini projects that you could find, and then you can have time to, again, maybe go work with a customer instead of, hey, instead of sending your, this was something that we did that was not saved millions, but instead of sending all of your backup via email, and then I have to go and save it on my server, here, can you just save it out there? And then sales has access to it, I have access to it, anybody has access to it. Say if you needed an invoice copy or backup or PO, it's there. It's universal, it's in the cloud, but that's something that you don't have time to do if you're over here manually applying cash. But you can do that if you save an hour a week, So I think that's just key. It's always trying to be creative in ways, and it's not just about the money necessarily, but also time. Then you have time to go and do something else, like recoveries. There are millions of dollars in all companies, but you don't have the time because your processes on the front end might be, messed up or need to be evaluated. But if you could automate that or, make that less manual, you might have time to go and chase recoveries because you might not have a company that you can pay to go and do that. So you need the people to do it, but if you free up time here, you might be able to do that. I think that that's what you have to think about. It's just, creative thinking, as well.
That's been, I just say, that's been key for us. That's how to establish longevity with the team. Once you get to that point, when folks come to my team, I say two things: tell me how to do this better, and what else could we be doing? Like you just said, and it starts like that, an hour a week or whatever. And so now the way I think through it is, okay, I've automated this work that we've been doing real well. And so then when they come look, okay, what are you going to do with the folks? Like now I can lean in more to these other things that we just started that have also started to produce. Once you start cutting costs and producing audit recovery, you're going to get popular, right? They're going to come, hey, because everyone's in that same pressure. How did you do that? How can I do that too? So let me tell you, and part of it was because I got to walk around my company and be a salesman inside my own company. Here's why we should do this. Here's why we should be auditing it. Because like you said, it's out there. It's out there. We just got to go get it. And I love, if you foster a team that'll just be open with you about that. Hey, we could do this and we could do that. Sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. It's okay. You've established, here's why we're here, and we're going to go try these things. When they work, they can really work, right? So it's exciting.
Yeah, that's another good point. Good team. I always say you need those steady Eddies. You always need people that are going to do the work. They're reliable. You need high potential employees as well. We also need creative employees because you need that, how did you do this? Or I have an idea. I love when someone comes, hey, I have an idea. I don't know if this is going to work. Okay, let's see. But at least come with ideas. Even if I'm the manager, I shouldn't have to come to my team and say, I want to do this. Or I talked to Craig and I got this idea from another company. But I love when they're creative and they bring that to the table. We have the celebrations, Kraft Heinz with a Z with Kraft Heinz, so celebrations with a Z, but you can recognize employees just for, hey, you thought this idea up and this was a great idea, thank you. And encourages them to, find other ways to be creative with, for example, recoveries. You don't think of it, oh, I'm not gonna be the hero, but then they're like, now coming to you, like, how did you do this? Right?
Yeah.
Like everybody's talking about this project? How did you do it? Where did you, start? Who did you reach out to? I think that's key when you have that.
I think I just want to restate something. I think both of you guys are saying that I really like is when you're trying to get buy-in for this new initiative, it's about selling a better future to the individuals, right? And I think, Barbara said that, I think Jason said that indirectly as well. But I think for me personally, that's a great takeaway, to be able to sit there and say, hey, what are you doing that you don't like? What do you want to be doing that you can't? That could be your future, right? And if we do X, Y, and Z, and if you can sell the individual on that, you're going to get cooperative, individual who wants to be a part of it. And they get, if you don't sell the individual, you might get malicious compliance, you might get, avoidance, you might get, but I think, both of you are saying that it's, when you go into these types of initiatives, I know I've seen Jason do it a ton on the contract compliance side, selling someone on a better future, individually for them, in the context of them, just because it's better for Kraft or just because it's better for Walmart doesn't mean it's better for Ben necessarily, but it could. And let's talk about that. And here's how your life could be better. You can avoid these things you don't like to do. You can be doing more things you do want to do. And here's why we're doing it. It gives them a why. So I really like that as a takeaway.
It just gave me another thought that I have with employees when I have those conversations. What do you like to do? I can't take away everything. If you don't like it, then you might need a different job. It's just a piece of it. Yeah, you're in the wrong role, but there's a piece of it. So if I could free up an hour a week, we did this at a previous company where they said, I'm really interested in like marketing, you're in AR. But, a lot of people transfer within companies from marketing to sales to AR. Where did you get your background? Went to sales from AR because the background here. And really, if you have that mentality, then when you go into sales, you're going to be successful because a lot of sales, it's really hard to get their buy-in or their help on things. They just want to get the sale. We're trying to get them to help us get the money in. But once they get the sale, they're like, I don't care to get the money. We did a program where they would just go to another team and just see what they were doing. So maybe on the order management, you'd go from AR and spend an hour a week with someone in order management, and then you can see the downstream effect of what they're doing. And then they got benefit out of it too, because they said, if you would just do this, then I wouldn't have to do this on the AR side. Oh, I didn't think of it. So even that 1 hour a week, because they had an hour that freed up from a manual process we got rid of, we automated. It didn't save the company thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, but it changed the process. And then it helped another team and they got that knowledge. Or where do you struggle? Instead of getting frustrating emails from another manager, from another team, your team's doing this wrong. Well, let's put this team and this team together and come together, like kind of like this, like a roundtable, a workshop, and how can we make it better from the start to the finish? I was telling you about the workshop we did. Just from the start to the finish, you might just sloppily enter a PO, but then you don't understand it has a downstream effect on invoicing, on sales, on getting the cash in, on paying. So I think that's key too, but you don't have time with it because you're doing all this busy work.
A lot of silo you see in places, and to your point of when you can get out and you can not be siloed and understanding how it touches everybody else, you can get a little bit more of an appreciation for just having that issue. I have an offshore team or whatever, and they're just like, I just need to hit this button, I just need to hit this button. And I'm like, you guys realize now you're the first point of our customer experience before down the line. And they're like, we don't understand. I'm like, you see all of the merchandise that comes in here. If we've got a problem with a vendor, all of these things are feeding downstream as to what seeds that you're going to see. So someone goes to order something, then they get it canceled, they get disappointed. So just seeing how their small role when they think they're just processing an invoice or seeing something can have another impact. They start to think and take a little bit more ownership of those kinds of things. And to your point, I think it's us from a leadership perspective talking to our teams. Because I tell them 0 + 0 = 0. If I don't know, we can't try to figure it out if you never say anything. So.
And you can put up guardrails, right? But don't put up like roadblocks, right? Those concrete barriers for your team. They're never going to be creative. They're never going to think outside of the box. They're just going to keep doing their jobs. And a lot of companies are outsourcing. You have offshore companies where it's black and white. I need to do this, and then I hit enter. If it doesn't tie, now what do? I can't hit enter because I can't save because it doesn't tie. they don't know what to do. If you allow them to be creative, think outside of the box or come up with ideas, it might not be something that you implement now, but maybe you keep it in the back of your mind and 6 months down the road, you go back and revisit that. You go, Jason, remember, we got this process fixed with order management. Maybe we can look at the process. I thought that was a great idea, but now let's, do that. So I think that that's, key also is you can put up some guardrails and you can just,
Yeah.
go anywhere, but
Yeah.
I think that, allows them to,
They have an immense amount of knowledge. And sometimes just communicating things, it's like, oh, wait a second. I know that when I've talked to my teams and they've sparked creativity in me with just them saying something or not being afraid to say something, with, hey, how do we do this? And we're like, we're not that, but we've got these things you guys could do. And it's just, I think it gets two ways to figure out that communication piece is big.
yeah, I love when people come from different industries, maybe like from a healthcare to CPG or, construction. They have very different ideas. So in this session that I did a couple weeks ago, the lady is in healthcare and she said, I would love to do this, but we can't automate that because we have patient data. I didn't think about it. I didn't, I'm in selling mac and cheese, that I didn't think about patient data with social security, addresses, all of that. And she goes, so it's very manual and we're trying to figure out a way how to automate this piece, but we can't because of this patient data.
That's why I cringed when you said the lady was key credit card data, which is just like a whole broad piece, like in front of you.
My first
That we
reaction,
won't, that was,
the reason we did it was, we just came to somebody's desk and there's like credit card number, expiration, code. I'm like, why is that on your desk? Can't have that. Well, I need to run that later. I got a phone call and then I went to lunch. I go, no. You have to take your lunch 5 minutes later and run that credit card and shred that or do it on the phone. You can't have that on your desk sitting around. So obviously that was another key piece in the business case. Hey, we don't have this credit card information. That's huge that someone could run a customer's credit card, so.
anyone who's dealt with identity theft knows where those things start.
I think we kind of touched on this a little bit, larger companies, I always say start with a smaller pilot project, something that, would have return on investment, but it's not, don't start with, deductions if that's your, biggest piece. 100 people, maybe start with something a little bit smaller. It'll be easier to maybe convince leadership. And then if the project is successful, then you can move to the next biggest manual piece or the next biggest project that you're thinking of implementing. So in the AR space, I think, we have, a lot of very manual processes to streamline, but it leads to a lot of cost savings for teams. And then, bringing back more money to the business. That's what I say. So start small and then maybe you can move to a different, or a larger project.
You almost start with something where you already know the answer. Like you know all those steps already, what you learned going through that. Now you've got a recipe, so to speak, for you get into the unknowns or the bigger. Yeah, start with what you pretty confident is gonna work.
Yeah, you have to show a success story. They're not gonna let you do something if the first project that goes is a total failure. And then you're like, now I wanna go do this. They're like, I'm gonna do that. So,
Yeah.
you have a project that's successful, they'll say, hey, well, how did you do it? Or you have, like you said, other people coming to you from other pieces of the business, asking like, how did you do that? I wanna maybe do that in marketing, or I wanna do it in supply chain. How did you do that?
Yeah. Some of this topic was our own documentation, operation procedures and such, and searching through that with Copilot and different agents and search like that. And then you realize you ask this question, it pulls that answer from every version of every operating procedure that you've got. So now you realize, okay, you got to control your data like there. It only knows what you tell it. It pulled all those answers. They may not be relative anymore. So now you know that when I'm searching for something I don't know, right? Okay, you got to control that data. Get the wrong answers out. You already know it's wrong.
I think we talked a little bit about this, but it's again, the human element. I think it's key, don't want to lose that human element. You might be able to, reduce headcount, but you're never going to be able to get rid of that human element. Or like, I think you said, your first point of contact with our customer, that is what they're going to remember, that first point. So we need that human contact. And just that connection, even on the complex issues, some of those reconciliations that not going to be done by automation or AI, you're still going to need some of that, in the business. So the creativity, the critical thinking, still gonna be needed in automation, even with AI. I think that's something that I think even you touched on. You need that human contact.
When I was in a conference or just a dinner last week, one of the big things that they were putting on and saying is that AI isn't the replacement of people necessarily. It's just maybe different people. So the people that you have today, whether they embrace it or not, but just a different type is who's getting the data or something is wrong there. And I think that was a big point as they tried to get across. Everyone thinks, CFOs, everybody, that, okay, AI is going to replace everybody. AI is replacing all of us in this room, and that's not necessarily the case. Just different people, different ways. And we're not, we know we're not there yet to understand it, but it is something that will eventually work its way in. It's going to in most businesses.
I think we kind of talked about this, the fear of job loss, but again, not necessarily job loss. I think, it requires a new set of skills. So maybe hiring people with that intent, knowing that, hey, we might need these skills down the road. And I think that's what people are fearful of too, is you're used to doing this. Maybe even if you only did it for 5 years, this is the only thing I know. I've been doing it for 5 years. Automation comes in, you're fearful of this new system. What if I can't pick it up? What if I don't know how to, learn this macro in Excel? I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm not going to be able to, run this program. So I think that also comes along with fear, not necessarily the job, but maybe I won't lose my job, but I won't be able to do it with the new software or the new process. I think people have that fear. I think the biggest thing is communication, like really involving your team in the blueprinting phase. After the business case, after whoever has won, but it's very important to include the team. They're the ones that are doing it day to day, and you don't want to miss something. Again, the knowledge. They have the knowledge. They're in there the day to day. You have to rely on them to see opportunities that you might not see. And being open to, if they bring you something, maybe we can't do it now, maybe down the road. Or like you said, it sparks creativity in you. Like, I love hearing, like, why don't you like doing this? Well, don't bring me a problem unless you have a solution. So you don't like doing it, but what is your solution? I don't have a solution, so let's create one together, but at least have an idea of how can we automate this, or how can we do it differently? I think you were talking about maybe moving a piece from another business into yours. How do you convince them that, hey, it is kind of an audit task or auditing an invoice? Like, how do you convince leaders that should be brought into your team? Might be money, it might be time savings, but that's another key pieces. Just having even leaders that are creative that, talk with other leaders of their processes and working together. Because I think a keyword, silos. The reason they're little silos, right? I'm in the AP, but maybe there's something I can learn from AP even though I'm in AR. What can I learn from audit? Maybe I need to change this on this side so that he doesn't have to do all this work downstream. So I think that's also really important. It's, again, keep saying the creativity, but that really is empower your employees, creativity, in the new roles or, fear of losing jobs. Those are just a couple of things, because the people are the biggest piece to being successful. And I think just here's some quick real world examples, but I know like retail, online retail, using AI to manage inventory, process orders, provide personalized recommendations and marketing. Seeing companies, automating social media posting, email campaigns, healthcare hospital automating patient intake, appointment scheduling, leads to patient satisfaction. I think there's, little examples in the real world that you can just start with. Like, again, pilot projects. It doesn't have to be something that's huge, but even just, automating emails so that you don't have to send those manual emails. I created templates when we did have to do that in collections. Like, here's a template, especially when you have offshore teams, pieces, communication, or just the grammar, a lot of errors. And I've heard from people, I saw there was these, errors, grammatical errors, so I don't trust the data they're sending, or they send the data wrong the first time, they're not going to trust it the second time. So I've tried to, even if it's manual, like I've created templates, just here, use this and just put in the dollar amounts or what you need. even an out of office template. I know that sounds silly, but I had to create out of office templates. This is what we use. I'm out of the office, put the date, just not I'm out of the office. So if you're out of the office and I'm like, are you ever coming back? Like, what day are you coming back? That seems kind of simple. But I said for our customers, for sales, for someone that's trying to reach you, I'm out of the office, but you don't have a backup. So I need something to them, like a customer or sales, it might be critical. You need to have someone as a backup. So even something like that, it's simple. It took me 5 minutes to create a template and send it out and have a staff meeting, right? But it was critical because it really helped with communication with your customers with sales. Just the future of work with automation, I think, it's gonna continue to grow. Always involves, again, humans collaborating with technology, not competing with it. That's key. Working together. I think people are just so fearful of sharing knowledge because they're gonna work themselves out of a job or share knowledge, I'm going to lose my job. And that's the fear. It's that change management piece that you really have to instill, working together, communicate it, be clear. And there's gonna be stuff that you're not gonna be able to share with them. Maybe you are gonna lose 20 people. You're not gonna go in there saying, hey, we're in a room and 10 of you right now are gonna lose your jobs. Can't share that, right? There's a way to communicate it, but still involve the team. So I think that's key is just collaborating with your team, knowing that, the communication is really, really key, the way that you present it and involving them, including them, and then next steps, like where are we going from here? Once we do this, I think, it's hard to get people on board because they don't know where you're going with it, right? Just do this, implement it. We've made the decision, and I hear that a lot. Well, leadership doesn't understand. That's not gonna work. So involving them from the beginning and any of their fears, or they're gonna hold back information. I think I shared this morning at breakfast, I had a disaster of an implementation because two of the key people held back information. So when we went live with the cash application, we promised leadership it would be at 80% hit rate, we're at 60, and we were, what is going on? Well, then we found out they were fearful of losing their jobs, so they didn't tell us. This is how Walmart sends their remit, column 1 is the invoice number, column 2 is, and then the next customer, maybe Target was the opposite. They just said, oh, all customers are like this, their remits are like this. No, they weren't. Each customer, we had to create a custom template because they didn't submit I didn't know that because I'm not in the day-to-day. I'm just trusting the team that's telling to tell the consultants, and then we go live. And so, really knowing that your team is involved, how it's going to impact that. And then the key, like, this is why we need this information because we promised leadership 80% hit rate. We're only going to get 60. So you don't want to look like the ones that are responsible. So we want to work together to hit those goals, but it's all about communication rather than just relying on them. I learned that mistake. You just don't rely on them now and make sure, are we confident going forward? Because in the end, it'll land on me if I'm the one that's managing the project. And then I think this is just overcoming the fear to take the first step. Like I said, start by, something that's maybe just a pilot project, and choose tools for their skill level. If you don't have the right team that's in place, if they don't have the skill set going forward, it's going to be really hard to get them on board once you go live. And don't be afraid to experiment. I always say, just bring ideas to the table. You might fail, but at least we tried. So how can we do it different? I think that we don't want to make things harder. We want to make it easier for them. And I think that's what, we need to share with the team when you do go through an automation journey is we're not trying to make this harder for you, we're making it easier. So if you think that it's going to be harder or this is more work, we've done time studies where, he's shown how to do this in the new way. And some of them were, hey, it's going to take me longer because now I have to go and manually pull this back up. I have to go and manually do this. We didn't realize it because we just saw on this side, oh, it's going to automate everything. We didn't think about the next 3 steps. So we thought, okay, we can't change it. Maybe not now for this customer. Let's do it for these 5, but let's hold off on these 3. We've done implementations where it's customer specific because it's not going to work with the customer's, software that they're using or their portals. It's not going to work. So I think that is, we don't want to make anything harder for them or they're never going to be on board for an automation journey. Again, change management. If it doesn't go well the first time, they're not going to try something again the second time. And then, just emphasize security and risk management. I think that's a key for leadership is legal concerns, like I was sharing about like healthcare industry sharing, patient information. I think one of the fears that, you have is you use like an SAP or an Oracle, companies going in the cloud and using that data, having access to that is very scary for the head of an IT department, just going in there, having AP, have all their banking information, like how do we know that it's secure? Making sure that those legal risks or that risk management. And then just again, clearly communicating and demonstrating the benefits. I think that's key, just to have your team involved and just a really clear guideline of where we're going and, just fostering that culture of transparency. Again, you're not gonna be able to share everything if it is critical to maybe headcount losses or that, but I think they're gonna be more able to adapt and be more innovative and creative if you include them and it'd be as transparent as you can. I think that's probably one of the biggest things is to try to be as transparent as you can. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
I have a couple, but I don't wanna do what I do. Think more conversation. So, in a second.
Well, I want to say thank you, Barbara. I am on a different journey. I've been with Ameris Bank for 5 years. And we have no automation or very limited automation. And we're just not ready for AI just yet. Some of the biggest challenges was coming into an accounts payable department where no compliance, no segregation of duties, 11 people to process about 50,000 invoices a year. No statistics and volumes, no anything. So basically had to build that department from scratch. By the time I got through with about 3 months into the job, I knew that we were gonna have 4 people. So I kept one person that was with the company for like 5 years or in that department. Brought someone over from the bank that was that we were acquired from and brought her over. And then just have constant turnover in invoice processing. But I think the biggest challenge is with the team was I don't, forget about where you've come from and what you've been doing in the past. I don't need you just to be mechanically driven. And that was probably one of the biggest hurdles to get past because the team was operating without any policies or any procedures. So kind of building up that confidence and saying, this is going to be your job. You're not going to run payments. You're not going to keep invoices and set up vendor records. That's not what you're going to do. You're going to concentrate on vendor maintenance to the next person. You're going to concentrate on, payments. Invoice processing, got a lot of turnover there. I'm on new hire number 31. But just building, taking the time and letting them feel confidence and build that confidence in what they were doing on a day-to-day basis and why they were doing it. From vendor maintenance. Well, if you don't have a W-9 or a W-8, are we paying this vendor and not withholding, penalties or taxes or things like that? So it was just working with the talent. And I think once you start working with that talent and building them, then anything else that comes into play, like you're going to introduce automation, then you're going to introduce AI. I think that team that embraces that, but you have to develop them to embrace it, they will be with you in the long run. And they will be able to, whatever projects or enhancements that you bring their way, they will really embrace it more. But those that, just want to be mechanically driven, if you can't get them out of just being mechanically driven and not knowing why they're doing it, what's important, then it may not be a fit for them for whatever reason. And then you have to focus on getting that talent. So it's been a journey for us, 5 years. And hopefully, one of the things we did introduce to our company is a robotics company division. So I am working with, trying to get a bot to kind of help out with vacation schedules and perhaps turnover. And it's key to partner up with other companies and areas in your company to kind of let them know what your experiences are and what you have desire to do. So it looks like I may get a bot in about a month. And then from there, I'm gonna take over. They're like, we didn't know you knew how to build bots. I'm like, yeah, I know how to build bots. So, just kind of get them to lay that foundation for me and then kind of bring it in the shop and maintain it myself. But this will also may help me maintain invoice processing because now your job looks differently and you're not doing the 10 key every day. So that's my two cents.
Calories, my mind. So just for the group, so you guys talk about a lot about creativity, but you want people to raise ideas, you want them to use the example where you had an individual or a couple of individuals maybe who withheld some information, put you in a bad spot. What are things you can do to kind of make individuals feel more safe sharing stuff? Because I think a lot of times when someone's not sharing something, like let's say Jason, right? Someone doesn't want to share something with Jason, they might feel that they're not safe to share it. Like they don't want to, like you mentioned, they didn't want to get in trouble. They thought maybe they'd look bad. How do you foster an environment where people feel safe so they can be like, hey, Barbara, sorry, but there's this little thing that we're missing. Any thoughts here on mechanisms for making people feel safe?
I think you have to, oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, because a lot of your presentation resonated with me, and we're kind of in a midpoint of our automation journey, also transformation journey, also productivity journey, right? Which is the offset to that. I think it starts with change management and tone at the top with any project, right? With any movement, any change. And we have very strong messaging from our CEO that every role should be thinking, how can I do my job, whatever it is, better, faster, stronger. We hear those words every town hall. They're plastered all over the building. So the tone is set at the top. So it's not just on the management, middle management, upper management, executives to, carry that message. They hear it all the time. So it's embedded in the DNA of our ways of working and how we work. So then it makes it easier, right, to approach that employee, asking for ideas. We got roundtables instead of team meetings. We want to hear from everyone. What are the things that are going well on your desk? What are the things that aren't going so well? And what ideas do you have to fix it? If you don't have that idea, then maybe someone at the table does. And so we've been on this journey of, again, everyone is expected to make their job better. Leave it better than you found it. And there is an embedded kind of performance management process that supports that as well. So it's embedded in the DNA. You can rotate out of your current role as a salaried employee every 18 months, and it's encouraged. So you come in 6 months, you learn your job, stabilize it, improve it, you're free to move on. And your manager will support you and pass on, great feedback to the next manager. If you are an hourly employee, you can move every 12 months. So depending on the skill set of that employee and what career aspirations they have, it's embedded in the environment, right? Which makes it a little bit easier, but we still have that fear. So again, it's the messaging, it's letting them know, and they do know, right, that some change does carry, attrition. It's just a part of the process. They've seen it, they know, but they also know as part of performance management, it's expected that you share the information. And it's just normal that's our way of working. And when you find employees that, are not sharing, then it becomes a performance discussion because it's an expectation.
Like that.
And it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I second that. And, my company, your performance, it's not what you do, but it's how you do it. So you get 2 ratings and then an overall rating.
Right.
So you're held to it. So, but yeah, the messaging from the top is resonates with individuals. And so what I was gonna recommend is, you really have to build trust with these employees. And that's where it all starts. And they have to know, okay, I'm gonna trust this process. And I think they have to know too that I'm not just gonna lay all my cards out on the table, but what is it gonna do for them? So I think if you let them know that, this is gonna help improve your workday, maybe minimize your stress, help you work, easier and allow you to do more things that you enjoy doing. Like you said, what else can you do? And I think it's really unpacking that with each individual person, like you said, and finding out what keeps you up at night, or what are your key challenges? Or where do you see there could be room for error or whatnot? And then, ask them what they could, want to be doing. And so you have to really build that rapport. And that's hard to do when you're dealing with the whole AP, department and everything. But yeah, it starts from the top and then down to, each manager managing these folks.
I think one way I would say, I tell my team, I make mistakes. I'll make more mistakes. We're all human. So mistakes, I'm not sure this is gonna work. I'm not sure this thing's. You probably think it's gonna work or you weren't gonna bring it, right? So come through, like, what's the worst that could happen? Once you know that, it's not gonna cut the stock price in half, right? It's not that drastic, and go, then let's try. Literally, what's the worst that could happen? I'll be as transparent with them, with everything. Here's what the bosses want. Here's what the tone from the top is. Here's what I'm hearing. That's kind of like, we got to do that part. We have to go get that part. We're hitting that. I feel like I've bought myself some room here to go and attempt some other things and learn. And even the automation pieces that we built that didn't work, we learned a lot. We learned a lot that helped the next one, right? And so, engineers going, oh, wow, that system has to talk to that one, and then this one, and then back to, that spaghetti of all your system and the connection. So I said, I feel like we foster a good open environment there for bringing up new ideas. Like I said, sometimes they work, and if it didn't, we probably learned something, right, that helps us in some other scenario. So some folks come along with that faster than others, and that's fine. Like, I'm not bought in yet, right? And they're gonna, probably with that first one that comes in, and go, okay, what's up? Right, and so say, here's what I think, again, we talk about the services that we offer. There's always a few more things. Like, I've always got a couple of things, like, we could do this also if I had a couple more people. So if I could take this out, then I can start leading. Then I gotta show it. I gotta deliver it, and then I've learned to go tell that story and market and say, it's not always about the dollars. You gotta go talk about the how, not just the what, but the how. Look what we're doing. You get popular, you increase the bottom line, you're gonna get popular. So that seems fun to me, to sit back and think, what else could we be doing? Where else are the nickels? Let's go find, the quarters and the dollars,
Well, we're at time. I had a second question, but we'll take it less later. So yeah. No, you're great. You're great. No, you're good. You're good. Actually, I have another who's listening to me. Yeah. Jason.